Long form, that's what they want. Long form, long form, long form, long form, long form, long form, long form. Just asking, oh, Ewan, we like long form videos. I like when you do a long form painting video. When you paint and talk about it for hours. Do that some more, Ewan. Paint for hours and talk about it for hours. Do more long form painting videos, Ewan. Hey Ewan, could you do more? I really like those long form painting videos you do, Ewan. Could you do more of those? You know, the long form ones. You know, the ones that are like just a bit longer. The long form painting videos. Could you do more? Like, you know, your painting videos, but the long form ones, the longer ones, the ones that are longer. You know, your painting videos, but longer painting videos where you talk about the paintings, but you do it for longer. You know, the long form painting video. Ugh. How long can I keep this bit going on? Ugh. I've got a long form for you. It's my penis. Ah. See, it's a lot. It's a long form. Is that some zombies? No, they're ghouls. And that's ghouls as in the monster type of ghoul. Like, you know, ghosts and ghouls and goblins and gremlins and gonads and grandmas. They all fit under the same monstrous umbrella. Not the Fallout ghouls, though they do bear some kind of resemblance to the Fallout ghouls, I suppose. But that's a coincidence! That wasn't planned. Or was it? Maybe it was... I was about to say maybe it was submersibly. It was a submersible. A plan dropped into my brain by submersible. Piloted by a billionaire, and then it imploded under the sea and they all died. Ha ha! Of course, everyone will say, oh, I feel bad for the kid, though. Yeah, well, maybe he shouldn't have been born to such a cunty, idiot billionaire. Yeah? Maybe that. I know it wasn't the same billionaire whose kid it was, but... Because according to the Mormon doctrine, every person on the earth chose to be with the family that they're with. You chose that. Up in the pre-existence, you chose to be born into the family that you are in. So, you know, all those people who you know, in the famine countries, you know, or as one of my managers at work called them, the poverty countries. You know, we're going to send some money to the, you know, the poverty countries. Yeah, those poverty countries. Amazing that you got to be a manager, and I got passed over for management positions 4 times in a row. But little Miss Poverty Country can get a management position and do very well for herself. Brilliant. Shows what kind of people they're after. Clearly not me. Maybe they're supposed to look like, or maybe the internal workings of my brain meat was making them look at least a little bit like Fallout ghouls. But that wasn't the intention, yeah. So I'm painting these largely with turquoisey green. It's not quite green, but it's a turquoisey green. You can see on the palette next to it, it looks green, but it's turquoise and then dark green and some browns and a little bit of like yellows and whites and stuff. And you may be able to see in the skin of the ghouls. I've tried to use different shades of those turquoises and greens together here and there amongst the skins, so they don't look too uniform, so they don't just look turquoise and then highlighted with lighter turquoise and a lighter turquoise. You can see a couple of them do look more green, and little parts of them here and there look a little bit more green, a little bit more turquoisey. I like the teeth on these ones, especially the 2 on the left, where their teeth are all hickledy-pickledy, and they sort of stick out and jut out here and there. They were fun to draw and paint. Just these, I was quite happy with the composition. I always fucking go on about how it's difficult to compose an image of many bodies within the same piece. Just trying to figure out where to fucking put everybody. But this, I got quite lucky on this. This whole piece actually came together really quickly. I did one rough doodle of GunViking. Oh, by the way, this was two commissioned pieces. Somebody commissioned a completely separate commission, a piece they wanted, and then someone else said, for their commission, they'd really like a GunViking piece, which I'm always ecstatic when anyone asks for a GunViking piece. If you're watching this and have thought about getting a commission, I'd love to do a GunViking piece, because I really enjoy painting GunViking outside of the comic, because the comic can get a little bit like stringent. It should be the opposite of that, but I do box myself in when I do the comic, and I'm like, GunViking has to be portraying the story or whatever. So I really enjoy when someone says, just paint me a GunViking picture, and I can just go, cool, let's just do a cool GunViking picture outside of the story. It doesn't have to mean anything or follow any narrative. It's just a cool GunViking picture. So I was so happy when somebody asked for that. And I was all ready to do it. Then a person I mentioned before, who had asked for a total other separate commission, said, actually, out of nowhere, he said this with no prompt or anything. He said, actually, could I change that to a Deathfist commission? And I said, bloody yeah, you can. So that's two of my original characters that two separate people wanted paintings of. So yeah, I was thrilled. The Deathfist piece I can probably use for a cover or something for the book, or even if it's like a back cover, or just fill a page if I need to. Because sometimes with the way you set out pages in books, if you've got like an odd number of pages, you get like a spare page at the end or something. So if I've got a spare page, I can throw this painting in there. So I had GunViking commission, I had Deathfist commission. And I thought, like, what can I do? What can I do? I bloody know. I'll paint them in one image and then tear them apart, rent them asunder, and that'll be fun, wouldn't it? It'd be cool. So that's what we're doing. GunViking on the left. I'm painting his skin right now. I painted the skin of the thugs on the right hand page, which is the Deathfist, or the right hand of the page, which is the Deathfist page. But yeah, this I did in preparation for this. I did a really rough sketch of GunViking in the pose he's in, and then on a separate piece of paper I did the Deathfist sketch, and straight away I was like, oh shit, okay, no, those poses are perfect. I'm happy with those. They sort of fit together kind of well, sort of similar poses but opposite directions and whatever. You probably want to hear about the painting, don't you, rather than how the composition came together. Flesh tones for GunViking. Again, trying not to be too plain and bland with the flesh tones. So you can see there's some like little smidges of like green and turquoise in there, bits of pink, the usual raw umber, yellow ochre, crimson red and white, just to get that basic sort of flesh tone. And then pink on the knees and the fingertips and elbows, because if you look at your hands and shit, that's usually how it goes. You get pink extremities, tips and shit. I got a pink tip. My penis again. And then so I drew them on pages, and then I started just sort of filling in. Like I'll have one ghoul here, I guess, with his leg reaching, or his arm reaching under GunViking's leg, and then I can sort of fit another one in, which is the bottom right one, and then another one in the back, and then another one there, and then I can fit a head in the front here. So it all fit together really seamlessly, almost. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's bloody good enough, isn't it? I was really happy with the composition, and like I say, it all came together very, very quickly, very easily. No second drafts, just got the rough pictures done, got them done a bit bigger on the good paper, which is it's a like a thick-ish. What is the sketch pad I use? It's a mixed media art pad, which is a fairly generic thing. Does it have a GSM 250 GSM, so quite a thick paper that's made to have like paint and stuff put on it. And it's acrylic paints, and I water them down a bit, but not too much because I like them thick, just like I like my penis. It comes round. It comes round. It all circles round. It's all about the penis. All about the penis. GunViking's coming out nice. Look at his flowing golden locks of hair. His purple suit. I feel like I could have done more contrast in his flesh. It feels a little bit. I don't want to say monotone, but there should be brighter patches. But then I was aware that I would be adding in the muzzle flare of from the gun, from him firing the gun. So that would add a bit of brightness from one side. So I don't know. I think if anything, I should have added a bit more contrast into the colouring of GunViking. It does look a little bit like the tone. It looks like one sort of tone if you sort of blur your eyes, whereas the ghouls have very dark parts and then very light parts to their skin, and GunViking doesn't. By the end, it sort of works out with the outlines and stuff and the muzzle flash, but as it stands, it does feel a little bit wishy-washy, kind of. I also feel like, you'll see when I get onto painting Deathfist, I had the contrast with him relatively okay, although a large part of his character is just his fucking poncho, so I don't really have to worry about it too much. Guns! As always, I tend to paint my metals in a blue-grey kind of colour, so they don't look like they're made out of concrete. If you paint them grey, you can make grey look metallic if you paint it. You can make anything look metallic if you paint it to look metallic. Metal could be any colour, really. But I tend to go for bluish metals so that they don't look like concrete or rocks or something. Also knowing that Deathfist's cloak would be grey, as well as the buildings in the background mostly. If GunViking's guns were grey, then it would look like they're made out of cloak. It wouldn't make any sense. Or poncho rather than cloak. It's a cloak-like poncho, isn't it? And then we're on to Deathfist. One thing I've almost agonised over with Deathfist is the idea of painting him in colour, because he was never ever in my head had colour. I only ever envisioned him as a black and white character. So when it comes to painting him in colour, I did think if I could just paint the thing in grey tones, or just Deathfist could be in grey tones, and then even like the characters around him and the world he inhabits could be in sort of muted colours, but still colours. But I used one of my favourites, which is the raw umber and white combination, which gives this sort of grey-brown colour, which I do quite enjoy. Got all the muscles and shin, Deathfist fist arm. I like the heavy shadow on the downward pointed fingers. It does make it. It gives an immediate sort of like almost box form to the hand, where you've got the one plane on top and then another plane going down, with the index finger sort of jutting out a little bit as his thumb curves underneath it. It's a very effective way to do hands, and as you can see I did on the ghouls as well, sort of where they're going upright. You've got the tops of the fingers painted, and then the back is in shadow, facing away from the muzzle flash of the gun. Deathfist's skull it's got the raw umber and white in there, but it's got a little bit of black in there just to make it a bit more grey than brown, because I did want his skull head, which is kind of skull, kind of not, to look more skull-like than his arm, because his arm should have skin, but I want it to look like sort of dead, dying skin, so it's not like as fleshy coloured as GunViking's, for instance. Clothes, fairly basic. I tried to have a few kind of uniform things going on. So the clothing of the ghouls and the goons. The ghouls and the goons are basically all in browns. There's a little bit of grey here and there in the goons, as we'll get to. And painting creases like this in clothing is a sort of a cheaped way of painting creases, because it's really just sort of like chunky lines, and it gives the impression of folded material without really looking like folded material. But it just sort of gives the idea of it's a good enough sort of bluff. That's you look at it and you accept it as folded, creased material or whatever, without having to like find photo references of people moving in different kinds of clothing and stuff, or setting up photo shoots. I'd love to do that if I had the resources and the time. I'd love to set up entire photo shoots of people wearing rags and getting into all these different positions. But also the danger there is if you use photo reference for one thing in a painting, or any piece, any comic book work, any page, any drawing, any illustration, if you use photo reference for one thing and not for anything else, it can very often be very apparent that one thing has photo reference and everything else doesn't. So you've got to be careful. You've got to balance it out. You can't be, you have photo reference a lot of stuff. If the majority of it's photo reference, then fine. And, people, you photo reference a pose, a little bit, a crease, a little bit here and there. Like in Deathfist, in the start of the original, or the first few pages of Deathfist, where he's eating a hot dog, him eating the hot dog was referenced from photos I took of myself, or a little video, in fact, of myself eating a hot dog, because I wasn't sure how to draw the bread being eaten, because that's not something I've ever really drawn before. So I used photo reference for that, but I didn't copy the photo. I just sort of literally referenced the photo. So I think that there's smart ways to use it, and there's dumb, stupid, idiotic ways to use it. That being just copying the photo. But yeah, I'm relatively, I won't say happy, but content with the painting of the clothing, the rags on the ghouls and such. Although with those rags, they do look even more like Fallout 4 ghouls than they did previously. But fuck, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Shut up. And then same again, just sort of painting chunky lines to make it look like folding clothes that aren't really there but kind of are there. A grey hat, a grey shirt, greys and browns. I did want the Deathfist side to be very grey and brown, and then the GunViking side, it will be more colourful because it'll have the blues and whites of the snow in the background. And I think by the time it's finished, the whole piece, it looks like two separate pieces, but they're painted together in such a way that it's one painting, but not necessarily one scene. So it's two scenes blended together into one painting. Either way, it's an impressive feat, isn't it? Painting two commissions at once on one page and then splitting it apart after the fact. That's pretty impressive. How many people do that? How many people do a 24-hour comic? How many people do a 12-hour podcast? How many people paint multiple commissions in the same piece at the same time? Not many people, that's who, but I do it. I do it because I'm the best. I'm the best bloody godfuck artist in the whole shit-ass ball-bag world. Deathfist's trousers. basically just a darker, more grey version of that brown grey. As I started painting it, it was getting dangerously close to the skin colour of his arm, so I had to sort of darken and greyen it up a bit more. And they look different enough, and more just sort of chunky lines in the direction that the fabric sort of would be creasing and folding. Again, sort of blagging my way through, looking like actual fabric, just close enough. Some dark grey for the shadowy front of the poncho, and then some lighter grey. And that's something I'm impressed, not impressed, but sort of almost proud of myself that I've gotten better at drawing Deathfist's poncho, because I was very unsure of it. And that stopped me working on Deathfist earlier than I actually did, because I was just so unsure of what the fart to do about his poncho, because I just couldn't seem to get the shapes and the flow of it right. And sometimes I feel like I got it, and sometimes I haven't. And sometimes I feel like I've got parts, literally in one image, parts of the poncho right and parts of it not right. In this painting, I feel like it's 95% where I want it to be. Like big and puffy, because it's almost like a parachute where he's jumping up, and increased in parts where his sort of arms are bending and the hood sort of looks quite good. I like his feet as well. I like how I've ended up shaping Deathfist's feet. Like they are kind of foot shaped, but then they get very, very flat at the toe, and then they've got a sort of long, thin sole to the boot that I quite like. I quite like drawing and painting that. So that's fun. What the hell am I doing now? Oh, the backgrounds, I guess. I got a little bit like unsure, because I don't even know what the fuck I'm talking about. Shut up. I knew as I was painting Deathfist, the character on this piece, I decided what I want is the area around his feet and the goons to just be pure white, or more or less, and then that fading up into the buildings. But then I wasn't sure how dark to do the buildings, and I realised if I did, especially the building on the left, if that was too dark grey, it might just blend in straight with his poncho. So I had to be a bit careful of that. But ultimately you just put more white in there, and then it's fine, isn't it? Doesn't matter. And then you can see there, it's fine. There you go. It's dark grey enough, and it's fine. And then some blue. Add in some blue, some bits of blue in there to make like an ice wedge wall. You can see I'm trying to paint like ice colour / shapes in the left hand side of that building as it leans into the GunViking side. You might also be able to see there's a thicker piece of masking tape right down the centre of the painting, which is holding the two pieces of paper together. That'll get removed at the end. So I am actually literally removing a strip of the painting itself, including the details upon that piece of masking tape. But it's whatever. There's the white fucking background element, I guess. I wanted to make very clear the shapes of Deathfist's sort of lower body, the parts of a body that are actually a body, because his upper body is just poncho. So I wanted to make sure like the dynamism of his legs was very visible, as well as the shapes, like the sort of quote unquote silhouettes of the goons were very visible. And I figured the easiest way to do that is just to make it white, which I think in this instance works, because it doesn't feel bad or silly. I didn't want to put like the details of the buildings or pavements and street stuff in there. So I figured just painting it white would be a safe bet. And because it's a painting and I can do that, it doesn't need to be one thing or the other. So fucking whatevs. Originally, here's some trivia. I had originally planned to have the sunny side of the mountain in the background be on the left, So the lighter side would be left and the dark side would be on the right. But I realised with the muzzle flash being on that side, then it would sort of bleed into the side of the mountain, and you might not be able to differentiate the muzzle flash from the mountains. So I swapped them and I made the sunny side on the right, so the side of the mountain on the left is darker, and then that way when I paint the muzzle flash in, it shows up a bit more. Problem solving on the go, you ho. And then not quite white but very pale blue for the snow. And so you've got like snow banks going into this iced wall thing that goes into like the building of the Deathfist side of the thing, yeah. And so this snowy snow under and around GunViking and the ghouls sort of mirrors and bleeds into the whiteness of underneath the Deathfist. And so it's good that I feel like it's good that there are elements in each painting which kind of mirror each other, like the mountain in the background, the buildings in the background, the snow, and then just the white space, which is almost, it feels to me almost fourth wall breaking, because Deathfist is a black and white comic, so there is a lot of like white space where the streets and stuff are, and so I'm sort of utilizing the language of black and white comics within the context of this painting. Some bullshit. Just believe things I say even if I don't believe them myself, and then it will make your experience of this whole thing a lot better. Getting a bit more blue into that building just to make the ice part of it seem a bit more ice and like, and a bit of purple into the building just for a little bleed. And that way, when you've got the separate paintings, the Deathfist one has a little bit of purpley blue on that building, which almost might seem out of place, but it doesn't quite. It does still work. Now painting a mix of browns and the light blue, which gives this, sort of grey, basically. And then highlighting that a little bit with more light blue, as you can see, to try to make them a bit of a glow, but a bit like the snows just sort of blending into the ghouls, just so they're not so starkly contrasted against the snow, but are part of that environment, as opposed to just being painted atop it. I feel like it's important to do that sort of thing, to make your characters feel like they're part of the painting and not elements stuck onto it. And then the blue glow on GunViking, I was partly sort of happy with, partly not. I think I'm just out of practice of painting GunViking, frankly. And so when it comes to like his shapes and this blue glow, I feel like it could have been more successful. Ultimately, it's fine and it works. And the piece, I like I say, I'm really, really happy with this piece as a whole and both of the commissions individually. I felt like when I was doing this blue glow on GunViking, which is like, the underglow from the snow, I was sort of kind of maybe a bit slapping it on, not necessarily being incredibly aware of what I was doing. I was just putting paint onto the thing and going, this'll do. So maybe that's a me problem. I could have just taken a bit more care. But this whole thing in total, I think, took around between 6 and 7 hours, which is a long time for me to spend on one piece. But there's a lot of elements. There's many bodies, lots of details, and I am effectively painting two paintings at once. So it stands to reason that it would take a lot longer. And for me, like if I spend 1 or 2 hours on a painting, that might seem quick, but if that's just like one character for a commission, paint Earthworm Jim, sure, 1.5, 2 hours, done, fine. But then if that's two main characters, including background elements, including bad guy characters around them, with lighting effects and whatever else, and little details here and there, fore and aft, then yeah, 6 to 7 hours is reasonable. In a similar vein to how I was sort of happy, sort of not happy with the underglow on GunViking, similar to that was the underglow on the ghoul in the front, the bottom left. At first, it was really clear in my head, like, yeah, put a blue underglow on him. As I was painting it, I felt it getting away from me. And I started putting paint in places I wasn't sure it should go, but I think I kind of just about did it good enough that I was sort of happy with it. And again, it comes together with outlines and shadows and things. This is still, it's getting there, but it's not finished yet. Purple skies. Just because it seemed to make sense. I didn't want to do a blue sky because there's all the blue ice and snow and shit is there. It would blend in with the mountain and whatnot. So a purple sky it was. A little bit of purple on Deathfist's arm there, just a little him, blending over into the other side of the painting. I think painting skies generally works best if you do it lighter on the horizon, fading to darker the higher up it gets. Because then eventually it fades into black, into space, doesn't it? So it sort of makes sense. And the Earth has an atmosphere which glows from the Earth outwards. So it makes sense that you'd paint the lighter colours on the bottom of the horizon and then fading up darker toward the upper portions of said atmosphere and fucking whatever. Which I didn't do. Again, there's not too much like light to dark contrast on that, but just light enough around GunViking, for instance, that he stands out and he's not blending into the sky too much. I did have these shells painted in. There's been times where I've painted GunViking comics and I've painted the shells at the same time I paint GunViking, which is always the first part I paint of any GunViking page, is I get GunViking painted and then everything else around him. So in the comic, I'd paint the GunViking character and then the shells and then paint the background around that. And then painting the background, like if you just imagine trying to paint that mountain around these shells, it would be the biggest pain in the arse. And then I realised I could just paint them on top. It was embarrassingly late into my GunViking painting career that I realised I could just add the shells on top afterwards. A very, very minimal cost of effort. It would take so little just to do that. As you saw, because the shells took, here, seconds. And they're all... I tried to make each of them leaning a different way. So some of them you've got like the bottom of the shell facing the muzzle flash, which is highlighted with a little burst of light, and then some of them are facing the opposite way. Some are like a bit more in the back, some of them are a bit closer to the front. So you've got different highlights on different parts of the different shells, which I'm quite proud of myself. They're not all just like highlighted in the same way. Getting that muzzle flash painted in, you can see it contrasts well against the darker side of the mountain, so I'm happy with that. Got the glow on the side of GunViking's face and his arm and stuff. I was really happy with that. I don't think I ruin it with the outlines. Doing these outlines, actually, I remember as I was painting it, I was being tremendously careful as I was painting the outlines on GunViking, because I didn't want to just slop them down too thick and freely. So you can see like around the hair and stuff, and on these parts of the bandages, I'm really paying attention to like not just doing thick lines outlining everything, but trying to use small bits of hatching like in between the hairs and stuff. And I think that was successful in that respect in terms of outlining these parts of GunViking. And again, shadows on parts of the shells, on some of the shells, not on all of them. It's not necessary to do all of that. And then that's basically it now. Just this. Well, no, I guess it's not actually. It's not technically that it now. There's still plenty to do. This is where it's trying to define everything, make sure everything has a definitive shape. All that knee looks a bit like a penis. That wasn't on purpose, I promise. It was. It wasn't. It wasn't. Just kidding. It was. No, it wasn't. It actually wasn't. But it could have been. But it wasn't. But it could have been. But it wasn't. It wasn't. But it might have been. But it was. It wasn't. I swear. I promise. It wasn't. But it might have been. But it wasn't. Maybe it was. No, it wasn't. I didn't. No, it wasn't. I didn't try to do. And you'll see. I did some shadowing on his arm because the muzzle flash, and I didn't want it to be too bright on one side of his arm, but the shadow would be on the far side of his arm. And then you'll see in a bit I go back and add a bunch more shadowing because it just sort of, it's when you step back and look at it and you just think it just needs just like a thick black line almost down the center of that arm. And then outlining the ghouls and such. Some people have said, and I agree in some parts, that certain pieces I do look better without outlines, and I will concede and agree that every now and again I do pieces that look better before I add outlines, and then I add the outlines, and I even look at the piece and go, oof, that looks better as just like a painting and not as a drawing. But at the same time, I like the outlines. On this piece, there's a few elements to this piece that I think could have benefited from far fewer outlines, if not no outlines at all. And actually, you may see when I get to it, I start trying to add the lines to Deathfist's fist arm and abandon that because I think I realised if I start adding in like all lines in between and over all of the muscles you can see, it would look horrendous. So I can say now already I'm very happy with how Deathfist's arm came out at the end of this. And there's me adding in, so you can see I'm like, yeah, right, a line down here, some more definitive shadow on that arm. I like the shadows on the back of the heads of the ghouls because the back of the heads are already in shadow, but then you add just a little bit of like dark hatching and it does give that like a little bit deeper, more definitive shadow. And again here, really trying to be careful with my use of outlines, really trying not to overdo it. On the fist, I think that was successful. I quite liked. I did a little bit of hatching on the left side of the arm, and then yeah, you can see where I used my finger just to like wipe some bits out there because straight away I could tell I wasn't liking the direction it was going. So then just using little bits of shadow underneath like veins and stuff on the arm, I think that does a lot more for the piece overall than it would if I'd like used hatching to define all the muscles and stuff. I'm really happy with that arm as it is. Even the arm that should be the easiest, almost the one on the other side, wrapped in bandages and wearing a glove. I'm sort of less happy with that one, but that's just how it goes. Just adding in shadows, boots and shit, the sole of the boot at some point. Again, not outlining because it's made up of these bars on the sole of his boot. So I was careful not to just outline each of those, but just a few shadows underneath some of them, and then some lines here and there, and then just add in the lines to the thugs, the goons. I like this guy's hood, big puffy hood. I like his hat as well, using those lines that sort of fit, a big woolly hat. It's made up of sort of stripes of wool or whatever the fuck it is. So yeah, you use a few lines that kind of bend to the shape of the head that really do give that sort of life and feel to the form of that hat. So I was happy with that. This guy in the background, his hands are a little bit like maybe one of the worst parts of the painting overall, but it's a small enough part that you can say it's almost insignificant. You just sort of take it as it is. It's Guy, he has hands, fists, whatever. He's doing his thing. You don't pay too much attention to it. Hopefully your attention's drawn to Mr. Fist and Mr. Viking. So that's the point, isn't it? And this guy on the bottom right, he was going to have trousers, but I just couldn't be fucked to paint them, so I just didn't. So he's just got that sort of dark red mess with the black lines in there. I really like the buildings as well. I like that I've got the underglow with you can see the bars that make up the side of the window holes, having the top bar be the lighter one as opposed to the darker one. Gives that impression of the up glow. Splatting a load of paint, a bunch of white paint, just using a toothbrush in wet paint to sort of splatter it everywhere. And then same again, but with dark red or almost black paint. Just for some texture. So you can see, like, especially around Deathfist's feet, that's almost exactly what I was going for. I was going to use a spray can, but I thought one wrong like press of the spray can and I just fuck the entire painting. So I used the toothbrush just to get a little bit of like speckling going on, and I am really happy with how it came out across like that area of Deathfist's feet. And then I saw a painting online, I think it was of a space marine or something, and there were all these like clumps of dirt around him and behind him, like almost surrounding him. And I saw that and I was like, oh, I'll try to do that in this painting. I think in some parts it works, in some parts it doesn't. So I've basically got all these clumps of snow around GunViking, which kind of works, but kind of doesn't. Maybe I added a few too many. And then I use, because I always draw like papers on the street in Deathfist, in the Deathfist comic, just to add like texture to the street scenes. And then if like Deathfist's running and you draw a few pieces of paper blowing up behind him, it adds to the impression of you know, him running through a street. So I added in, you can see I sort of drew all these pieces of paper floating up around him and a couple in front of him, which I normally would never ever do. This that you're seeing me do now is something I've never done in a painting, which is add these elements on top of the characters like this. Some spray paint and a few blobs, sure, but to actively like render objects like this on top of the thing in front of the character and around the character is really not something I've done. I added that one under his other hand just to sort of define the hand against the space of the window a little bit, which I think kind of works, kind of doesn't. I mean, it works in terms of defining the hand, but it almost looks like I did it on purpose to define the shape of the hand. It looks like he's holding a piece of paper almost. I don't know. But yeah, I really like the bits of paper on the Deathfist piece, sort of floating up around him. It gives motion and stuff. The snow clumps on GunViking I'm less happy about. I don't know. That's the sort of thing I'd need to practice really to like get good at, because this is the first time I'd done that. And now, oh, I didn't think I had the unmasking in this bit of the video, but I do. So look, ooh, look how impressive it is. And then I'll peel the thing away and it's two paintings in one. Oh my God. I did the white highlights at the end. I didn't mention that, but I mean, you can see it's fairly self-explanatory, isn't it? Just the white highlights on just this bit and that bit, just the little fucking, you know. And that's that. And that's, like I say, I'm really happy with that. It came together very quickly. You know, it took a long time to paint. I painted it over 2 or 3 days in a couple of different sittings. Yeah, really chuffed, as they say, with this piece. It was a good one. Hope you enjoyed it.